Hello and welcome back to the Sky Mobile Transfer Show, where we discuss the latest deals, happenings and rumours going on in the January transfer window. On today's show, we are discussing all things Arsenal, and what a lineup we have for you today. We've got the Athletics transfer guru, David Ornstein. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you.
Great to have you on board. And we've got Robbie Lyle, the voice of Arsenal fans online. Robbie, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Robbie, I want to kick off with you. This is a fascinating point in Arsenal's season. They are 6 points off Liverpool, who have a game in hand. They are 2-0 down in the Carabao Cup. They're out the FA Cup. They've got 2 winnable fixtures in the Champions League. But it feels like their season is on a bit of a knife edge. Do you think they have to go into the market this January to sign someone?
I think it's absolutely essential. I actually feel that whatever these signings are could be pivotal for our season. Saka's out. He's been injured since the 21st of December. He's had surgery on his hamstring. I've been told that's 4 to 6 months, that type of injury. We know that Jesus is going to be out for the rest of the season. Those are 2 absolute key players for Arsenal. And we've had so many injuries this season. I think Mikel Arteta has done well to get us to where we are with the amount of injuries we've had. But that forward line needs strengthening. If we're to have any chance at all of winning the league, which is the principal thing that I would love to see us win, right? And I still don't think it's over, because even 6 points in a game in hand, I don't think that's unassailable. We have to go out and make some good signings in this January transfer window. And I've been a bit annoyed that we haven't done it already. I know it's difficult in January, and I'm sure David will say how difficult it is, but I just feel that we've got a chance still. There's no point in waiting till the summer, because you wait till the summer, that's for next year. We still got a chance of a lot of things this year. The Carabao Cup, 2-0 down. Yes, you're right, but we saw Bournemouth go and put 4 past Newcastle. That's not impossible, right? The league is not impossible, and we're still in the Champions League, even though a sign-in, wouldn't be able to affect the next 2 games we got. But for the next stages of it, they can. So whatever plans they've got for the summer, I get it. You have your plans for the summer, you have your plans for January. But I think they've got to bring forward some of those plans, because there's still a lot to play for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on there for sure. It's definitely not over in any competition except for the FA Cup, of course. David, let's touch on, before we get into January, I wanted to take us back to the summer. Is there any feeling of regret within the club about how the summer went? Obviously, a lot of outgoings, bit part players, to be totally honest, on the basis of last season. But Marino, Calafiori have had injury issues. Raheem Sterling was the only sort of top-class senior forward brought in. Is there any feelings of regret within the club about how it went?
I think it's a bit of a difference between within the club and outside the club as to how it's reflected upon. I think it won't be seen as perfect, because Arsenal have been, knowing they would like an addition to the front line for quite some time, and it's why they've been heavily linked with some of the biggest and best strikers in world football for more than a year now, maybe even 2 years, with some of the best wingers like Nico Williams for a long time, and they've not managed to get any of those players. They have bought in players, but clearly there's an imbalance in attacking recruitment versus defensive recruitment and midfield, if you look at the numbers. Mikel Arteta, who's at the heart of Arsenal's recruitment, of course, as the manager, these are players that he wanted, and he managed to land them. So when you're talking about Calafiori and Marino in particular, it's not uncommon for within clubs that not everybody is on the same page about these sort of things. If you look at them as style of players, the position that they play in, their age profile, the value for money in terms of transfer fee, salary, and the whole package, and what knock-on effect that can have. But Mikel Arteta's done an incredible job at Arsenal since taking over. He's led them forward, and maybe he's earned the right to be the strongest voice in that conversation. But we can't ignore the fact that the sporting director has left in Edu. Now, maybe we'll never know the full story, but he's departed at quite a difficult time in the middle of a season where Arsenal were meant to be challenging after 2 years of pushing City close, to go that one step further, and especially when City have had a difficult time of it, and it leaves a an inopportune setup in terms of Jason Ato as his assistant stepping up on an interim basis, who, from everything we hear, is very capable, but he wasn't the main man. And we're sort of assured that despite Edu being on gardening leave, Arsenal already had their plans in place for January and even thinking towards next summer. But now that's put to the test. And it's been sort of reported that Josh Kroenke's over in the UK to watch the match in the Champions League and maybe oversee, what's going on from a recruitment perspective. And they've got capable people there. Tim Lewis at executive level, Richard Garlick as MD, the recruitment team, and Arteta. And their experience, that their record of recruitment in recent years under this ownership is pretty impressive. Like, a lot of the signings have been celebrated and Arsenal have become challengers again. But when you look at perceived deficiencies now, especially in the attacking areas in terms of not finishing their chances, because the chances have been plentiful, especially against Newcastle and Manchester United, then externally I think it is fair to reflect and say maybe that was a miss. And there were opportunities in the market that maybe Arsenal could have pushed a bit harder on and got things over the line. And now they find themselves playing catch-up of trying to do things in January, which is incredibly difficult, or waiting until the summer. And what impact does that have on the rest of this season? And it's a really critical juncture because the chance is there, as Robbie outlines in these competitions, and it is still there. And I do think there is optimism at Arsenal that they can pick up and have a really strong second half of the season. I would not write them off. But these are important days before that transfer deadline. And I think they're going to try to do some business. I would expect somebody to come in. I think it will be difficult to imagine that the squad isn't added to at all. But that doesn't guarantee anything. And we don't know identities yet as well. And I'm not sure if they do internally either. They'll be exploring possibilities. But it's often waiting to see how the market moves, as we saw with the Sterling signing on deadline day last time. And what arises, what circumstances change at other clubs to make somebody available. And I've got to say, and we'll get into this further, it's not as straightforward as we all think in terms of the availability of a player that you want, a player that wants to come to you, a club that is willing to part with that player. Do the finances work in terms of transfer fee or loan fee, in terms of salary, in terms of agents' commissions, in terms of rival clubs maybe being interested in that player? Why is that player available? You need to quickly do your due diligence. How is it going to affect your transfer plans in the summer? Can you bring something forward? If you bring something forward, what ramification is that going to have on your PSR, profitability and sustainability? These are all real life questions. And I've said it a few times in broadcast, and I target this at myself as well. We're not playing Football Manager. It's not just you can pick someone up, put them in, take someone out and remove them. It is a tricky picture. Now, I do think, you can look individually at those signings last summer and say maybe it wasn't Arsenal's finest moment. But at the time of them coming in, it's all well and good being wise after the event. There was a lot of celebration among Arsenal fans when they came through. And you say maybe sort of slightly periphery players left. But I would look at an Emile Smith-Rowe and say, maybe that's exactly what Arsenal are lacking now. Some creativity alongside a Martin Odegaard in exchange for Odegaard, who hasn't quite hit his best level, it's fair to say, since returning from injury. And so, I think there is a lot we can pick over. When you see clips of Edu speaking about the Sterling signing and admitting that wasn't part of the plans, you do sort of look at it and think, they need to get things right from here on in, and they've got an opportunity. It's just under a fortnight as we record this until the window closes. That is significant time within the world of transfers, and so let's see what they can make happen.
I think any Arsenal fans, feeling a little bit impatient. It's great to hear the amount of plates that are spinning going on in the transfer window.
Lot of plates. You're right, David. Yeah, but everybody knew from the summer, right? Every Arsenal fan. Even after that window, I remember I said famously, and I get slagged off for it now, right? Because I said, maybe give it a 7 out of 10. Maybe it's probably a 6 out of 10. But the one thing I said, and everybody said at that time, is, what about a striker? We let Eddie Nketiah go. We haven't brought a striker in. I thought that was a fundamental error that they've made. And now I feel that we're paying a price for that because, like you said, look how many chances we miss. Now, they must, in this January transfer window, we know about the difficulties and what you said there. You're right with everything you said. But that's the job of, these guys who do transfers. It's not an easy time. They got to try and make something happen because there's still a lot to play for.
Yeah, and I will pick up on that because the numbers don't lie and your eyes don't lie when you're seeing it, and they're not stupid inside the club. They'll be seeing it for themselves. The one thing you've got to point out when you reflect on the decisions at the time is that they decided their first choice striker was Kai Havertz. Now, you could reflect and say, well, he was purchased as kind of a left-sided number 8, but he has emerged, and especially in the calendar year of 2024, as being one of the leading strikers in the Premier League in terms of his productivity. You've got Gabriel Jesus, who is a trophy-winning international striker of repute. Unfortunately, his injury record would set alarm bells ringing for counting him as somebody that's going to be available for the whole season. And they did let Nketiah and Flo Balogun leave previously, the 2 strikers that have come through their system. And the cynic would look at it and say, Arsenal don't actually have a striker at the moment because Kai Havertz was bought as a left 8, Jesus is out injured, and the 2 youngsters have gone. And you could turn to a Leandro Trossard to play as a false 9, or find some auxiliary option. You rely on Bukayo Saka when he's fit. It's a blessing to Arsenal, but maybe it's an over-reliance. And it is quite staggering to think that Arsenal Football Club, in a way, do not have a top recognised frontman in the way I've described it. And when you see trophy-winning teams, they normally do. And so that is something that, whether it's going to be now or in the summer, I do think it's at the top of the agenda to address without a shadow of a doubt.
I think one thing that I keep on seeing Arsenal fans online point to is the fact that their points tally is actually pretty comparable to this time last year. I think they're 2 points worse off. I think they scored 1 fewer goal and conceded the same amount. But what happened last year was Arsenal were absolutely incredible in the second half of the year. They won 14 of 16 games, got up to a seriously high points tally, missed out on the title by 2 points, of course. But it just feels like the way Arsenal are playing at the moment, it's really difficult to envisage them winning 14 of 16 games. Robbie, let's get into the second part of the show, which is where I wanted you to bring forward your realistic signing for this January and your dream signing for this January. And we'll see what David thinks about it.
He'll put everything in a dream.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Let's come to kill my dreams.
Broken dreams.
Let's kick off with your realistic suggestion. Who would be your realistic one for the final, as we say, 2 weeks of the window?
So I'm going to put this forward as a realistic. I think Victor Osimhen, right? He's out there. He's a proven goal scorer. He's on loan at the moment at Galatasaray, where he's scoring goals again. He won, it was his goals that took Napoli to win in the league. And we do know that Napoli want to sell him. Now, I think that's a gettable deal. Obviously, it's not going to be the cheapest deal. We all know about he wanted very high wages and stuff like that. But I think if we want to get a striker that's going to move that dial, he's that player. I know there's been players like Sesko and that are said to be our number 1 targets, but I just feel we might have to tear that up because we need somebody right now. And I feel that he is a player of the highest class that is available right now if you go in and put the right, offer down on the table for Napoli. So I think that can be classed as a realistic signing.
Yeah, I think everyone always points to his injury record, but actually over the last 4 completed seasons, his minutes per goal is actually really comparable to Harry Kane, who scored 36, with Bayern Munich last year. So this is an excellent goal scorer, has carried a Napoli side, an underdog, quite crucially, to a Serie A title. First one,
carrying Galatasaray at the moment as well. They're top of their league,
as well.
Right? And everywhere he's been, he scored. Even when he was at Lille, he scored goals. So I think he's a realistic target.
And he's responded to being a club record in the past when he was signed by Napoli. But David, that's enough of us. I mean, is there a possibility that Victor Osimhen arrives this month, do you think?
I guess your question to Robbie was realistic, and we don't know the ins and outs of a deal. So initially, at the start of this market, I was told there's no specific recall clause for Napoli to bring him back like that from Galatasaray. But in these situations, you tend to be able to break a loan if you need to, whether it involves some payment. I don't want to remind people of Wout Weghorst. I think he was on loan in Turkey, and it got broken by Burnley. Man United had to pay all sorts of money and got him in, and it didn't go particularly to plan. And so I don't know the feasibility of it, especially at this late stage, and whether Arsenal want to do that player, because this is where your due diligence comes in. They've not gone for him in a concerted way in the past, and that might say they don't think he's the right profile, they don't think he's the right character. I've not heard injuries so much being a problem for clubs looking at him. Maybe it's more the profile and the deal and what it involves. Look, every conversation you have around Arsenal suggests that the one that Mikel Arteta would love to do is Alexander Isak at Newcastle. The problem being that it's going to be extremely expensive. It's not going to be possible now. Maybe they'll try and attack that in the summer, but Newcastle are adamant that he's staying, and they plan to build with him. I mean, he's the jewel in their crown, and they're one of the most ambitious ownerships in world football, and wealthy as well. So they would look to raise money from elsewhere if they needed to.
I was just going to interject there, because I know Arsenal fans would want me to ask that question. Is there a situation, from the information that you have available, that Newcastle probably do need to sell a star this summer?
Well, they've got to balance the PSR books. We know that. And so, I don't know of them being in specific trouble right now, given that they resolved their last ones. They managed to, by hook or by crook, make the June 30th work, as we remember last time round. And if they do need to trade, I imagine, first and foremost, it may be players like Mikel Arteta, who looks to be on his way to the MLS, maybe a Sean Longstaff, and there will be other options. They came close to doing something on Anthony Gordon in the past. Again, I don't think he would be one they would like to lose, but I do hear of clubs who have huge admiration for him, even Arsenal among them, like Anthony Gordon. But I think Isak would be the last resort. You do have to remember, though, that there's a bit of a contract situation there with him at Newcastle that doesn't appear to have moved forward. So I don't want to upset Newcastle fans, but I do think we'll be hearing a lot more about Arsenal and Isak due to Mikel Arteta's affinity with him. He nearly signed him from Real Sociedad before he went to Newcastle. And then there's the Sesko question. And that's clearly a realistic possibility for Arsenal and other clubs, because they will have rivals for somebody of that talent, more towards the summer, because Leipzig have no intention of selling him now, and I don't think he sees himself leaving right now. And I've said never say never in this situation, because literally you don't know what will happen in football. If suddenly an ownership says, right, here's the money, and Leipzig find it too good to refuse, and the player says, okay, we were going to move in the summer anyway, so let's do it. I didn't see this coming. But the Sesko one I do think is an option for the summer. And then after that, you start to look towards different profiles, like your Gyökeres and players of that ilk. But I don't think that's one Arsenal have been prioritising for the style, and I don't think Victor Gyökeres has been prioritising Arsenal either. And there are other options too. You see Brian Mbeumo linked to clubs like Arsenal, but he's a summer mover. He'll have 2 years on his contract then. There's no suggestion of him leaving Brentford now. So you start to rack your brains as to what's realistic at this point.
What about, I've got one more for you, David. Jonathan David at Lille, because his contract's up at the end of the season. What about him? He's had a very good goal scoring record. It wouldn't cost them a king's ransom to bring him in, surely.
That was one that was on my mind while you were speaking about Osimhen, because you look towards the market of what is truly realistic, and he's one of the foremost strikers. He's got a great goal scoring record at club and international level. He's been looked at by all of the top clubs, and the contract is expiring in the summer. So they've offered him a new deal at Lille. He hasn't signed it. But in his mind, he may be readying himself for free agency, and then he'll have his pick of clubs. It will be more lucrative, and it's only like 4 months away. At the same time, Lille will put a price on whether they want to let him go now, which we're seeing it with a lot of clubs. Even in the case of Johan Wissa, who's bid older, contract 2026. Nottingham Forest bid £22 million. That's far below the valuation of Brentford. And so you suddenly start looking at it and say, a guy with only 18 months to go on his contract is being priced at whatever it is, 40 million. So Lille say, I don't know, 25 million, 30 million. And a club like Arsenal sort of think to themselves, we could do that now, but in 4 months, we could do it for free. And that's going to blow a load of the budget we have that we've already maybe committed to, or we want to commit to a Zubimendi. It doesn't.
But then in 4 months, the league's gone.
Well, so
the Champions League's gone. The Carabao Cup's gone. Everything. That's what they got to weigh up. What do you want to do now? Right, because this season is still all to play for.
So why hasn't Jonathan David moved so far? He's a player I really like, but why have the top clubs not quite gone for him?
Yeah,
is there something in his game that they don't feel is right? And clubs like Chelsea last summer, I remember reporting on their interest. Aston Villa have looked at him in the past. It doesn't quite click. I don't know, maybe if you look around Europe of who's been prolific this season, Omar Marmoush. Why didn't Arsenal go in for him? Manchester City are signing him for 70 million euros plus add-ons.
Right.
Can you just pull that out of your pocket if you're another club? It's not so feasible. Manchester City's finances have been in a much better position because of a relative lack of spend. Arsenal have spent massively in recent years.
But they have got money in. Like you said, when you talk about, your Ballagans and your, Eddie Nketiahs, Smith Rowe, pure profit, these players, because they all came through the academy, right? So they have got money in, right? To me, I know this. I'm the unrealistic fan. You're the person who takes all those things into account, quite rightly so. But I just feel that when you see what City did there we could have done with Marmoush. When you look at his goal scoring record, when you look at his ability to play as a centre forward, also in various other positions, maybe that would have been a good deal for us. And that's what upsets some fans sometimes, because they're like, well, why are we not being a bit more aggressive? Rather than just saying, yeah, but he ain't going to come. Yeah, Sesko won't come. Why don't we go and put an extra 10 down on that and try and get a Sesko?
The only thing I would say on that is that because I think Arsenal will be aggressive before the deadline, and I would expect something to happen. Yeah. I just don't know who it's going to be at this moment. But if you were to say, well, why weren't they aggressive earlier in the month? Well, Gabriel Jesus was fit and hit a goal-scoring streak that at that moment you can't predict he's about to do his ACL. And then you've got Kai Havertz there as the first choice ahead of Gabriel Jesus. And suddenly you bring somebody else in and they don't play, potentially, if things go to plan. And then you find yourself in the situation of what was the Spanish player who came for 6 months a few years ago? Dennis Suarez.
Yeah.
Wow. And everybody heralds that as an expensive disaster that then drains your resources. It's not a fine science.
But you can't do nothing though, David.
Yeah.
You can't do nothing, because I also look at it and say, right, all of us as Arsenal fans, if we look at it, when Saka went out and we looked at the team that's left, honestly, and said, right, is that enough to overturn Liverpool and win the league this season? That's what the ambition of the club should be. I think we'd all honestly look at that and say, no, it needs something else. So I think what's going to be put to the test now is the ambitions of the owners of the club. Is your ambition to try and win the league this season? Have a go at it? Or is it balance book times and that and wait until the summer? That's what's going to be kind of tested now. And listen, I don't want to go too early, because obviously you're right, there's still a couple of weeks to go, but that is what I feel a lot of fans are looking at. And maybe we're being a bit unfair, because they did spend £100 million on Declan Rice. They have bought in big signings.
Well, I was going to say that about the Arsenal signings of the last few windows compared to City, who have been consistently offloading 30, 40, 50 million pound players. Laporte, Mahrez, big wages, Cole Palmer. A number of players have left there, whereas Arsenal have spent a huge amount on this first 11 and a little bit deeper than that as well. Rice coming in for huge money, Odegaard, Gabriel, Saliba, etc. So I think City just had more wiggle room this window for sure. I felt more like I was at Wimbledon for a second there as well. That was brilliant. My final point on Lille would be they are in a real hunt for the Champions League. They'll probably ask for quite considerable money, despite the fact they're about to lose him in 6 months. They know he's about to leave. But I think they're 21 matches unbeaten. I don't think they've lost away since the 12th of September. They are playing Liverpool at Anfield tonight, so that will likely come to an end. But they're on a great run. So they'd probably look for a considerable fee to sell him in January when they've got a good chance of qualifying for the Champions League with Jonathan David, one of the top scorers in France. We've got a lot to get through. Actually, we're coming up towards the end of the show, but I think every Arsenal fan would want to hear about the ins and outs of the Zubimendi deal. I know it was a deal that Arsenal and Arteta were big fans on. Real Sociedad and Arsenal have a sort of pre-established relationship with Tierney and Nacho Monreal and, of course, Mikel Merino in the summer. This is a player that Arsenal are really excited about having signed, I imagine.
Well, they haven't signed him yet.
As close as it looks to.
Yeah, this is a player that Arsenal have been tracking for a long time, and in particular Mikel Arteta, which again strikes at the point I made about him being central to their recruitment operation. And they were unsuccessful in the past. He's always wanted to stay at Real Sociedad. Liverpool then tried to do it, and it seemed that they got really close on that one. But again, he felt his allegiance to San Sebastian, and now Arsenal have tried to move forward with it. My information is that they were sort of putting the work in, the building blocks in place, right back to last summer after Liverpool's pursuit and Arsenal were working on the Mikel Merino deal. I think it was well documented that Edu was out in San Sebastian trying to get that deal done. And no doubt there would have been conversations over Zubimendi at that point. You had Mikel Arteta's contract situation that then got signed in September, and maybe he would have wanted to see, what the club were trying to do for the forthcoming transfer windows. And of course, Zubimendi no doubt would have been at the forefront of his mind, especially with the Partey and Jorginho contracts coming towards an end. And so it seems behind the scenes they've kind of stepped forward on that pursuit. And it was a great scoop by Sami Mokbel in the Daily Mail, top journalist in his own right. And there's great confidence in Arsenal that they either have it in place or will get it over the line. I think we have to still see those final steps come to fruition, given what we've seen in the past with Zubimendi. Are Arsenal going to pay the release clause, which tends to be in full and is a real drain on resources at 60 million euros? Or do they, which has been suggested to me, possibly spend a little bit more, say 65 million euros, and then they get to do it in instalments via a payment plan, which is normal in transfers that are outside of release clauses, and that gives them some more manoeuvrability to do other things in that market. We still don't have decisions on Partey and Jorginho, but clearly, that would give them more option in the middle of the park, and decisions will need to be made on the sort of firm position of Declan Rice and Merino within that nucleus. And I understand a lot of Arsenal fans reacted to it with pleasure because he's a good player at club and international level, and a lot reacted with concern because it's not a striker or it's not a winger, and then there'll be a number of positions that need to be looked at, left back, for example, too. But if that does indeed come to fruition, I think it's a brilliant signing, but it's not only what Arsenal need, and there needs to be a lot more done around it too.
Nice. Right, as I said at the top of the show, we're rounding off with our Sky Mobile switch of the week. This is our favourite completed deal or rumour going on at the moment. Robbie, what's been your favourite completed deal or rumour that you've seen at the moment?
I'd have to go for the Marmoush one as my favourite completed deal as regards the Premier League, because I've been watching him in the Bundesliga. Some of his free kicks have been unbelievable, but he looks like a really, really talented player. And I think it's a great move, unfortunately, me as an Arsenal fan, but a great move for City, because since Alvarez left, and I thought they made a big error in not replacing him straight away, they've not really had a backup in case anything happens to Haaland. And now they have somebody who can not only back up Haaland, but can play multiple positions across that front three, even as an attacking midfielder. So I think that's a very, very good sign. I mean, we were all being told sort of at the start of the window when he was being linked to Arsenal and various other clubs that there's absolutely no chance he's moving. He's moved. And this is what gets some Arsenal fans upset, because they're like, hold on, he's gone to City. Why couldn't we have done it? That does happen. But I rate that as a really good move.
I like it. I rate it too. David, your favourite rumour or completed deal that's happened in the last week or so?
I like Romain Essa, if that's the correct pronunciation, at Crystal Palace. He did really well for Millwall, and when I've spoken to people there, they endorse him to the highest degree. They think he's a fantastic talent with the potential to go so far. It feels like a classic Crystal Palace signing from within the Football League, which Dougie Freedman, the sporting director, knows so well. They've got a track record on the likes of Eze and Wharton and Elise, and he's backed by Steve Parish in the market and the American co-owners, and a creative attacker who has all the attributes to do some special things in the Premier League. So I'm going to go for that one. There are a few others that have caught my eye. Probably can't mention on this show, but Kinski looks a really good goalkeeper at Tottenham. Sorry, Robbie.
Not sure about his playing out from the back.
Yeah, well, maybe you're satisfied. And bringing the Arsenal link into the show, I'm intrigued to see how Marlon gets on at Aston Villa, who came through the Arsenal system and had a mixed time of it at Dortmund. But there is such a player in there that Aston Villa's recruitment's been pretty good as well in recent years, and so that's a fascinating one as well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to talk about one that feels like it might happen before the end of the window. Man United heavily linked with left wing backs, and we've been speculating on our shows at Sky whether Anthony Robinson or Ryan Nouri or even Nuno Mensch might be the player they bring in, or Teo Hernandez. It doesn't feel like any of those moves are going to get done this January. But one player they are strongly linked with is Patrick Dorgu, who plays for Lecce as a left wing back there. And he is 20-year-old. He came through at Nordjylland, which is an amazing academy for developing talent. He's been at Lecce. He's now in his second year there. He's got 1 goal and 3 assists this season. I was watching some highlights of him yesterday because I admit I don't tune into Lecce every single week. But yeah, he looks really, really exciting, drives really effectively with the ball through midfield. He's been likened to Destiny Udogie with the way that he can invert really effectively, which is actually a slightly different profile to what I thought Man United would go for. I thought they'd go for a more natural width, but I'm sure he could evolve his game under Amorim, who's had so much success with wing-backs in the past. Supposedly, Dorgu sort of values his game or wants to emulate Eden Hazard is the player that he's got most in mind, which is fascinating from a left wing-back. He's been linked to Spurs, Liverpool and Chelsea in the past, but this actually feels like Man United might get this one done before the end of the window. Is that what you're hearing, David?
Well, they're in the mix for him. They might not be the only team, so I don't want to concern United fans, but it's not done yet, and the talks are progressing, and United may go over to Italy to try and speed that one up, because clearly he's high on their list. The thing is, there's a lot of moving parts and spinning plates in Manchester, the red half anyway, because they're kind of lining up their options in various positions and then deciding on their ins and outs, and there's a lot of unpredictability at the moment. Is Marcus Rashford going to leave or not? If he does leave, how much money comes in terms of loan fee, salary, maybe even a permanent transfer, however unlikely that is? Does he stay? Does Anthony's loan to Real Betis go through? What financial relief does that provide? What happens with Tyrell Malacia in the position of Dorgu? Although Dorgu has also played on the right, he's shown his versatility for Lecce. Can they shift Casemiro, which is a big aim as well, but no movement on that front. And so it's until they have a clearer picture, I don't know if they can sort of execute on some of these situations. And the finances, because Nuno Mendes was a player that they really liked, but it's too expensive. What's the value going to be on Dorgu? Because they've done deals with Italian clubs in the past, Atalanta on Højlund, and they drive a hard bargain, the Italians.
Amad Diallo too, yeah.
Amad Diallo, and it's not a release clause either, so... But Manchester United are clearly working to improve this squad, and they need to. And so that would be an interesting signing if it comes to the fore. But if he does want to emulate Eden Hazard, I'm not sure Manchester United fans will be too appealed by the fact that he plays at fullback. And I think some wingers in the Premier League might be licking their lips at the idea of him leaving gaps at the back.
Yeah, on the charge. We'll see what happens there. Guys, thank you so much for watching the Sky Mobile Transfer Show for this week. Remember that with all the transfers going on between clubs this window, it's never been easier to switch your network to Sky Mobile. All you need to do is text PAC, P-A-C, to 65075. That's 65075. And Sky Mobile will do the rest. Massive thank you to Robbie. Massive thank you to David. Let's see what happens towards the end of the window with Arsenal. Catch you next time.
Sky Mobile sponsors the transfer window on Sky Sports News.